Please. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Hello everyone on the internet. Hope you're well. No one's jumped the wall here, have they? Anyone escape yet? It was very nice practicing with old timers, both in physical maturity, but also in Dharma maturity, because usually there's, like, I don't think I could do beginners retreats. Because when I started teaching those beginners retreats, people, oh, they were just so restless. So first 3 days I wouldn't put my glasses on. It's really painful to watch. Oh, I don't know. So it's very nice to be with you. So a bunch of questions there. So that beautiful chant that we do, the 4 Brahma Viharas, it's good to bring up ideas or reflections on wholesome states of mind. Just naming them. You don't have to analyze them, or just naming loving kindness, compassion, joy, peace. These are important words that we can take inwards through recitations. These are good ways to do it, or writing on your desk, or like on, guess what my screensaver is? It's presence ever absent. Pretty cool, huh? For an illiterate guy like me. So the text, whatever I have on my email or goes off, and then it's presence ever absent. So this is the way of reminders and reflections around attitudes and direction and intention, which isn't really like the need for a lot of scholastic things. So I know for myself, I did all the lists, and that was helpful. And so I got a good, through my own efforts and my teachers, a good grounding in the intellectual structures of Theravada Buddhism. And that helps me a lot. And obviously then what I talk about is in some way subconsciously being influenced by those Four Noble Truths, things like that. Sometimes I don't explain it. I know where I'm coming from, but I'm not sure if you do, which is a problem. But so again, it's very good to actually go through the Four Noble Truths and get down the structure in your mind. And then within that, why do we talk about anicca, dukkha, anatta? Why do we talk about dependent origination? Why do we list experience as the khandhas or the ayatanas as sense experience? Why do we do that? And I'm not going to go in and tell you why, but if you understand that well, maybe I should tell you why. Huh? But if you understand that the project is both to live a good social life, so there's lots of recommendations on caring for each other, being responsible in your family networks, being responsible for your trees and your water and the environment. There's lots of things like that. But I think we get lots of that anyways. We got it from our mom, or there's just very good human values. So there's that part of it, to live good lives, to be good people. And I think we all are. You know, we do our very best to be good people. And then there's the parts about looking at consciousness from a different angle than the personal. Although it's individual, my thoughts are different than your thoughts. My bodily feelings are different than your bodily feelings. It's certainly individual, but it's very important to remember we're trying to reflect on this as dharma, as objects in awareness. And that's why we try to depersonalize it. And so we use language like the five khandhas, or dependent origination, or causality, or anicca, dukkha, anatta. This is the language which observes experience from a non-personal way. I'm not saying there isn't individuality. I'm not saying there's not. And I'm not saying that we don't have personal responsibility. We do have that. And that's the conventional sense. So these two ways of talking about Dhamma. So again, as I said I think on Friday night, in the individual way, we have this language of, I am the heir to my karma, born of my karma, whatever karma I should do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. I am the owner, I am of the nature to age, I have not gone beyond aging. I'm nature to die, I have not gone beyond dying. I undertake the precept to refrain from killing living beings, so it's I. So if you take that phrase, I am of the nature to die, and then you have, there's the deathless. There seems to be a kind of contradiction there. Well, it's not a contradiction, it's the one is conventional language, but then the aspiration is to realize this other part of our possibility, not just to live good lives as human beings, but also to realize what I guess in modern parlance we call the spiritual dimension, for lack of a better word. And that's why that language changes, so that we get some distance from our personal experience, get some distance where we can observe how things work, how things are, how things arise and cease. That's why we use two languages. Not two languages, but if you see what I mean. If we don't, then we're always in the personal. You know, that I'm angry at you, or I love you, or I hate you, or I wish you weren't that way, I wish I wasn't this way. It's always around that. But if we take the other kind of language, oh, aversion feels like this. But it's not about me and you, or infatuation feels like this. It's not about me and you. It's about these different modes of feelings, bodily sensations, emotions, perceptions, all of that. So you can see that language is very valuable. You step back and you witness, but you're still responsible in a personal way. So you need both. You need both. So that's where the word anatta gets very tricky. People get very confused by that. First of all, people say there's no self. There's no teaching saying there's no self. That would be an absolute statement. It asks you to observe, well, in the nature of experience, if something begins, then it will end. No? If something is born, it will die. Is that true? Have a look. So you look and yeah, if it begins, it ends. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And if it begins and ends, can you find any essence in that. Call it a person or a self. You look, you observe, no, I can't find any essential thing there. It's just this changing situation, experience. So this is what anatta is pointing to, that which has the nature to rise, has a nature to cease, and has no real essence in it. And that's different than if you say there is no self, or everything is changing. And it's a very, I guess it's popular Buddhism. You just say something like that and everyone, and it's not very subtle, is it? It doesn't take much imagination to say that. But to actually investigate and say, well, wait a minute. He says, well, so you start to get, well, okay, I am unhappy. All right, well, let's look at that. I am unhappy. That implies a kind of fixed fellow called I. So then I look and I observe, okay, there's certainly unhappiness. But is there an extra bit I? Is there? And so I look, and I can't find the extra bit. So unhappiness, yeah, well, yeah, still, yeah, okay. There's awareness, unhappiness. Okay, the awareness, is that a permanent thing? Now it gets interesting, of course, because now you're questioning some of the basic assumptions we have about who we are. And then, well, the only thing that seems to be consistent here, because happiness and unhappiness comes and goes, love and hate come and go, and so on. And then, well, wait a minute, there is this consciousness, or there is presence. And then you say, well, who is present? Nothing happens. No answer. Sorry, the muse says nothing. The oracle says nothing. Who is unhappy? And there's silence. So you can't find like a fixed person called Viradhammo or me, but you do find that there is presence. And you can't get behind that. Try to get behind that. You can't get behind that. That's it. That's your limit. So that's where the thinking mind cannot figure it out. And that's silence. Takes you to silence. Now, to say there's no self would kind of imply there's nothing. To say there is a fixed self would imply a kind of fixed entity. And all you can know is there is awareness of the way things are. And to take it to that limit and stay there and see what happens is, I think, what I've been trying to encourage. Take it to silence, take it to knowing, and then trust in that and see what happens. One of the problems you have in Theravada is the ideas around sama samadhi of things like jhana, which basically I think we should throw out. It's one of the most confusing kinds of words that gets people so mixed up and feeling totally inadequate. We find this is very common where a teacher will say, well, you have to get jhana. Of course, no one knows what it means except the teacher. So you're already in trouble because you have to get something you can't even describe. And the teacher gives you some kind of enigmatic phrases, which then you set about trying to get and attain. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with that strategy? Well, first of all, probably whatever you get, you will lose, because that which begins ends. So that's not deathless. If you get it, whatever you think it is, the teacher may or may not say you've got it. So then you're reliant on the teacher to kind of certify you have this thing or not. You're not even sure what this thing is. But mostly, from the people I've met, you just end up feeling inadequate. That you think you can't meditate. I met so many people who suffer like that. And it seems, wait, that can't be right. That can't be right. So what's the problem there? First of all, you establish self-view. You are someone who is inadequate. And to become adequate, you have to get this experience, which is defined by someone else and has no English equivalent. Very problematic. Then you set about trying to do this thing You try to attain to something. All right. And even if you seem to attain it, you then can very easily develop a conceit. I've got it, you haven't. In fact, I've got the third one. I've seen this, right? Or no, I don't have it, but my teacher's got it. It's really cool. Get the fourth one. And you get all, they're very, very confusing, very confusing kind of thing. So first of all, the sense of me trying to become something is already problematic because it's in time. And the Amata Dhamma is Akalika Dhamma. It's timeless truth. It's not tomorrow. It's not something you become. So that's, for me, problematic. Then bhava tanha, attachment to craving, rather than cultivate up with bhava tanha and think it's ever wholesome, and then feel deflated because you can't get there. But the whole thing has been a kind of setup. I'm someone who's an advocate that needs to get this. I can't get there, hence I'm pathetic. I'm answering one of these questions here. So the person feels inadequate, right? But what's actually happened is a sense of self has been created, a sense of having to attain something has been created, that attainment hasn't happened, and the person, and that's a whole, that to me seems totally wrong way of going about it. It seems to me Samma Samadhi has to be at the present moment. It has to be about, it should be, if it's going to be communicable, is that a word? Yeah. That it has to be about attitudes that each of us can actually share and understand, and maybe agree upon and work with, rather than kind of esoteric things that only the elite know and will tell you if you ask nicely. So why don't we, like I'm more and more I'm suggesting to people, get rid of that word. Or if you're really interested in that word, I've asked Vivian to put up a piece that is very, very good explanation of the difficulty with that word, its historical roots, and now it's a workout. And trouble is, I tell people to read it, but they don't have the intellectual interest to go through it because it's a difficult piece. I know the language around it, so I find it very interesting. So if you're really interested in that word, I would say read that article that I think Anne has posted to everyone. I'll link to it. I sent her an email. And if anyone here needs the link, I can give you the link. But I would say that is, for me, the people I've met in my survey of Theravada Buddhism, is that it's not a very skillful word. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I've just seen it used in an unskillful way because of those things. So what if one were to just, like Ajahn Chah never taught us attainment. He never talked about attaining states of whatever, or Sotapatti, Anagami. He never went that way. He never talked about attainment. He talked about awakening. So I resonate with that Luang as well. So if we then use the words around Samma Samadhi, well, what can we agree upon? Like right effort, right mindfulness, right focus, say. Well, presence is important, isn't it? Here and now. That we can agree upon. That we can all see. And if I'm constantly past and future, past and future, past and future, well, there's no presence, there's no possibility of seeing the way things are. So that's easy enough, presence. Sustained, that's an easy word. You have to sustain presence. Okay, that's difficult, but you can at least contemplate it as an attitude, not an attainment. You don't attain presence, you remember it. Oh yeah, that's it. Okay, how can I sustain that? You question yourself, where do my thoughts go? How does my thought processes work? And then I think silence. But silence really speaks to some of the jhana factors that you have. Now that's difficult enough, right? But it's at least it's something that you can contemplate and work on. It doesn't require me to tell you whether you've got it or not. Right? It doesn't need that. It's something you can take home and work with. So that's the way I find I'm using, trying to get my head around that difficult, so that you don't feel that you can't meditate. That's a very common one. So if it's like presence, I can awaken to presence. It's like this. It's like this. And how could I sustain that? Well, I make an intention to try to sustain it. And what about silence? What would the silence feel like? And so I said, use a word. It's like this. But notice the silence afterwards. Now, notice the silence afterwards. So then you're having these factors which you can actually train in, you can work in. And then you don't feel so pathetic and lost and so on. But if anyone's just kind of seriously interested in that word, please do look it up, because I think I mentioned this in the last retreat, but for those who are online, I was at a retreat in Mahong Son, and on that retreat, there was a woman from Beijing who's a scholar, and she's learned her Buddhism from the Agamas, which are equivalent to the suttas as can be in the Chinese. And the word jhana never implied absorption. And the word she used was ekagata. And ekagata this is one of the descriptions, ekagata in the Agamas was described as one-placedness, by being here now. But in the Pali, from the Visuddhimagga, there's a lot of history here, it was defined as absorption with nimittas and things like that. So she was quite surprised when she came across Theravada. We don't have this word absorption. We have presence, sustained presence. We had a really good discussion on that. It was a very interesting retreat. So really good dialogue. And then I came across this, and I had been reading this article. So, it's in there. So from all that, I hope it's not too complicated. I've just tried to glean from that words which I think are helpful. And so what I've gleaned is presence, sustained, silent. Then there's the word open. I think open is very important. So that brings me to the Brahma Viharas, which is how I started this piece. By the way, I don't know what I'm talking. It's all ad lib. So the Brahma Viharas are the manifestation of the human heart when it's not hindered by egotism, by greed, hatred, and delusion. It's the natural response to life of the enlightened being, the heartfelt response. So metta is translated as goodwill. We say loving kindness. But first of all, when we use the word metta, sometimes we use it as prayer. So I send metta to my cousin who's having a liver transplant. May you be well and happy. But that's really not the way I think it's used in the texts. That's a kind of Western prayer-ish kind of way of doing it. It's fine. But what I think Theravada Buddhism originally was trying to do is to really contemplate stream of consciousness and what would be wholesome in stream of consciousness, what would be wholesome and skillful to develop. And the Brahma Viharas are very skillful to develop, both partially because they're such a joyous manifestation of conscious being, but also they are counter to desire. Goodwill is not a function of craving. Goodwill is goodwill. Compassion is not a function of craving. Worrying about the one you love and hoping that their liver transplant will be okay is worrying about someone you love. It's not the same as compassion. Compassion can lead to worry, which is a desire, and it can be suffering. Joy, the joy at the beauty of another being or the beauty of life, is a natural response from a heart which is open and free. And then peaceful coexistence with the duality of life is a natural response to a heart which is free. So in terms of samadhi, I would say these are very important to contemplate. Because when you really contemplate what goodwill feels like, and you don't just leave it at goodwill towards a person, but you contemplate goodwill as an attitude to stream of consciousness, and that's different. And that's where Krishnamurti says that love is not the opposite of hate. So goodwill as awareness as goodwill, synonymous. is an interesting way to contemplate it. So like when people say we should have loving kindness for everyone in the world, including Putin. And if you're from the Ukraine, that's going to be a hard one. Or if you're from Canada, or and so on, then it gets very difficult because it's about individuals and it's about sending love. And you think that, well, loving kindness means I wish he'd win the war, and it gets all very confused. But if you look at stream of consciousness, and then you hear the word Putin, and I'm from Latvia, by the way, my parents. So we had a lot of, anyway, I won't go there. So when the word Putin comes into my mind, it's not a very beautiful perception. You know, it's the perception of, when are they going to bump him off? You know, that kind of perception. And that's not me, really. It's just the conditioning of news cycles and my parents' relationship to communism and Russia and so on and so forth. So that arises in consciousness. And what would goodwill mean? Metta would be goodwill towards that, neither rejecting it nor buying into it. And that would be mindfulness, which is open-hearted. But we have a lot of that. We have a lot of Putins in the mind and things which we'd rather not have become conscious. And they're not just so abstract, they'd be very close to us, very things which we're surprised at or whatever. As a kind of segue to that, I'm going to be going to South India in January. And Venerable Lama Siri has invited me to go on a trip from Chennai to Cochin, and with his parents. They're lovely beings, and they're very excited. And who would be coming with me? My brother. That's a big deal for me. The last time I did something was a basketball tournament when I was 15. Now, I bet you some kind of old adolescent stuff's going to come up in my mind. It's got to. Because I haven't lived with them. There's stuff there that it's got to be triggered, right? And I'm dreading it. Oh, behave yourself. Now, will that be me? It will be my responsibility. So when and if those things come up, hopefully I'll say, oh, isn't that interesting? Rather than be afraid of it, or worse, rather than believe in it, right? Rather than believe in it. And I'm sure a few buttons will get pressed. Big brother, I'm the little brother. You know, that'll be very interesting. And that's stream of consciousness. So Metta Bhavana, then, done in this way, is even this belongs. So as Ajahn Sumedho says, it all belongs, but not in a, what's the word? Not like in saying it's right or wrong. No, it's natural. It's natural to feel that. And that's where I think when Krishnamurti says that love is not the opposite of hate, it's that openness, that awareness is that openness, where it accepts all things, it rejects none. And that's a very important aspect to constantly bring up into consciousness, so that we can be with like difficult emotions and things, because they're okay. One of the questions here on that was, where strong emotion comes during meditation, I feel like the right thing to do is to not ignore it and find the silence, but rather be with the emotion while be aware of my breath and bodily sensations at the same time. When I say look at the silence, I'm not asking people to dissociate. That's not what I'm saying. You know, I'm not asking you to go to some la-la land where you don't feel things. That's dissociation. No. Silence knows things. And I think part of our, I can't say for this person, but sometimes our inability to not be fascinated with our own neurosis is a problem. You always want to get in there and figure it out and sort it out. So I would say that if you can really understand that the background accepts the foreground, It is. It just comes and goes. And if strong emotions come to abide with the heart chakra, I think you've got it covered. But I would be wary of always having to kind of get in there and always have to do something about this strong emotion. You don't have to do anything about it. It just is as it is. Having said that, if a person is truly blinded to their emotions, they need to see a therapist who understands that if they have, whatever. So that whole realm of therapy that we have in the West is fabulous. But if you're fully conscious and you know this is a strong emotion and you can abide as witness from silence, I would say it's very efficient. And it's very, very but if it is, like the other day, I had a strong sense of remorse because I had said something. I'm very sensitive now. I don't get away with anything. Nothing. It's terrible. And I said something cynical to the person, and later on, they didn't even feel it, but I felt it. It wasn't coming from a good place, and I something I need to really always be careful of. And the remorse is tremendous. But I just stay with the heart and the silence. And the mind wanted to create a lot of self-disparagement. Oh, I know you. And then I stayed with it, and the heart became even more loving from that. It all works. It does work. But I could have got in there and got into, oh yeah, God, there goes that habit again, you basket. I could have done that enough. I don't need to do that. But that's sometimes like getting too fascinated with these sankharas. They are as they are. And so we're always trying to, go away from the narrative and be open and welcoming to these things. So there is a place where some people get overwhelmed by these things. Like when I've talked with friends who work with PTSD, that's it, yeah. This method is too overwhelming. It's too difficult. They need other methods and other kinds of things. But for your kind of average meditator, for most of us, it's okay. It's okay to be able to do that. So then, what am I saying about Samma Samadhi? If I wrap all that up, then I would say presence. That makes sense, right? It's not too abstract. Sustained, yeah. The silence. That silence. What is that about? And then the openness. And to me, that seems like a pretty decent way of looking at what we're trying to cultivate as an attitude to the ongoing way of our lives. And the thing about that is, because it's not an attainment or getting somewhere, it begins to illuminate the background, because it is the background in that sense. And so it's not an experience which you get and then you lose, but rather it's the attitude which is emphasizing the background. Okay, I'll finish there. Finish with the Buddha's words on loving kindness. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and loves peace. Let them be able and straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm, and wise and skillful, not arrogant in let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove, wishing in gladness and in safety. May all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living here and far away, those born to be born. May all beings be at peace, let none deceive another, or despise any being in any state, let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. He that has a mother protects with her life, her child will be child. So with this heart, should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the earth, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the earth. Free from hatred and ill will, whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding, by holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being free from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. And closing point. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Buddhang Vivante Sawakatua Bhagavantang Supatipanoa Bhagavantang Samavantang Right, everyone. Well, or good morning.